Dynamic Church Ministries does is we work primarily with the smaller attendance, mid to smaller attendance churches. Those are the ones, even though that's the majority of churches in the SBC, those are the ones that are often overlooked. And when we get some type of a box program from Lifeway or NAM or somewhere else, it's often designed for that church that's multi-staff, got all this organization, all this structure. And so you and I are working at trying to pare that down and say, okay, I can use this piece, so basically churches that run about 250 or less are the churches that I work primarily with. And of course, most of those are churches anywhere from 35 to 75, which is the largest part of our denomination. One of the things that I do, and I work with churches and associations to do, is what we call a mystery guest ministry. And I've done this in a number of churches. I started doing it when I was in Michigan. But if you're interested in looking into something like that, it basically is helping you to see your church the way your community sees your church. Now, we oftentimes think we know what they see, right? But if you've ever walked in a church, never been in it before, you've walked in the facility, or you're a guest, you will experience things very different than what you think people experience in your own church oftentimes. So we have a process. I don't come in and do it. It's basically within your community and area. And just to tell you up front, it costs, a little under $500 for the whole process, and it will take somewhere around 2 to 3 months because we try to spread it out with a variety of mystery guests, usually 3 to 6 or 8 guests that will come and visit. And then we have a survey that we walk them through. I do some training with them before, but then we have a survey we walk them through and help them to know what to look for. So you as a pastor may see some of this stuff, but it's really nice to have an outside voice, especially people from your community who see things and are willing to be honest with you. So Jimmy has asked about doing that, and so we're giving a 15% discount for any of the churches that want to participate in that as we go. You can just contact me and let me know, and we'll jump into that. So, all right, well, let's jump into what we're doing for today. Have you ever thought about the fact that people in your community if they can't find you, you can't minister to them? So our tools and the way we communicate is really critical. It's really important. And one of the things about the church in today's world is oftentimes we're running 20 or 30 years behind what's happening in the world, right? In fact, I hope you're not in one of these churches, but I know some churches that I'm telling you, if 1970 comes back, they're ready. You know? And some, especially, here in the deep South, we've got churches that are 150, 175, 200 years old, right? And if they have not been very intentional, they haven't been able to update not only the property, but oftentimes the way they're communicating to the world around them. Which means that oftentimes those people in the community are just seeing them as an old, archaic kind of a building, and that's what they think about the church. They don't think it's relevant at all. So I want to hit some high spots. We're not going to have time to go into a lot of detail on most of these things I want to show you. But the things that Jimmy laid out in the promotional material are exactly what we're going to hit as we start going through. So let me give you just a quick overview of exactly what we're going to do. We're first going to talk about 5 communication axioms. We'll talk about best practices and some tools. Some you may be using, some you may not be. 4 steps to increase your Google search ranking in your community. We'll talk more about that. 3 keys to effective social media strategy, and 5 must-haves for your website. Now, any one of those bullet points we could spend an hour or more on, I promise you, especially with questions. But we're not going to have that much time, so we are going to hit some high points. So let's go ahead and start with the 5 communication axioms. I'm going to unpack each one of these as we go, but real quickly, be simple, be clear, be present, be persistent, and be focused. So the first one is be simple. Now let me explain that a little bit. When I mean be simple, you need to understand that simplicity is the king. We have the uncanny ability in the church of making things too complicated. Okay? We use churchy type language. We assume if we say, talk to Miss Betty, everybody who's there knows who Miss Betty is and they have her information. But if we have a mindset of trying to reach people and communicate with people in a way that people who may be just a guest to our church, they want to be engaged and involved in something, we have to remember, how are they going to hear it? I always try to tell churches, and I'm transitional pastor right now down in Pine Mountain at First Baptist Pine Mountain. And when I asked them about the activities they've done in the last couple of years, we started looking at that and came up with about 13 kind of main activities. And then we started going through and saying, okay, according to what the Bible says the church ought to be doing, how many of these things are we actually fulfilling? So is this a worship activity? Is this a discipleship? You know what I'm saying. And when it was all said and done, 11 of the 13 were fellowship type activities. And many of those were not a biblical fellowship where God's word is being talked about, that kind of thing. They were more potluck fellowship, social. And there's nothing wrong with social. You know, that's perfectly fine, and God wants that. But if a church is just spending all of its time on I, me, my, and mine, now we've got a problem, right? So you want to be simple and make sure you're communicating in a clear way. Think in terms of a 3-click maximum. Now this is going to be for anything you do. If you can do it in 2 clicks when you're building your website or a link on your Facebook page, anything you do, the fewer clicks the better, because you probably do it too. But we live in a culture where it's boom, 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 right? I mean, we're moving fast. And if it's not loading fast, we shut it, keep going. Okay? And that is kind of the world that we live in now. Also make sure everything is responsive, which means regardless of the orientation, whatever it is, everything needs to be checked on mobile. A whole lot of things churches send out, especially emails, they don't check it on mobile, and when it comes up on mobile, it looks horrible. So you really need to make sure anything you're doing and designing looks good on mobile, and don't miss that final step. Okay. Number 2, be clear. If you confuse, you lose. This is a marketing quote from Don Miller, and I always rephrase it. I say, when you confuse, you lose. Any of you been in a confusing business meeting? Should we take a vote on how many of you during that confusing business meeting actually got it to pass? A lot of times it doesn't, right? Or their hard feelings. So when you confuse, you lose. So our communication has got to be simple and clear, because the reality is if people aren't confused, they may be for what you're trying to get them to do or trying to get them to respond to, whatever your call to action is. But the reality is if they're not sure and they're confused, they probably aren't going to respond in a positive way at that point. So the next thing is 3, be present. I use what I call a 7 touches approach. And that is, you need to understand that just because somebody saw something one time in a printed handout, a printed bulletin, in an email, on Facebook, they're not typically going to respond off one thing. Now, your most core people probably will, if they just see it once. But people need to see things repeatedly. And so I use a 7-touch approach saying, okay, if you're my target, whoever it is, whether it be the community or my church members, I've got to find 7 different ways to make sure that information is getting in front of them over a period of time. Okay? I don't want to promote anything that's coming up in less than 6 weeks, because I'm going to have a hard time doing 7 touches in less than 6 weeks, right? So you want it to be simple, but you want to be present enough, frequently enough, that people go, oh, yeah, that's something I want to do. That's something I want to find out more about, whatever it might be. Be persistent. Already mentioned a few of these, but frequently communicate. So have a set pattern. Try to do it on a regular basis. Most communications, you need to be doing things on a weekly basis. And also understand receptivity, meaning whoever your target is, depending on what it is you're sending out or what you're posting, you need to know who's the reader. And so try to think of it in terms of how would they see this? How would they understand this? Again, I've already mentioned test everything on mobile, very important. And then keywords, we're going to come back to this in a minute, but repeat and saturate. Repeat and saturate. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. Number 5, be focused. Use the rule of 3 in communication. If you're sending out an email about an activity or an event, and your call to action is you want them to register for this event, then you want to have at least 3 links in that email that are registration links. Okay? Now, if you're using a mail provider, oftentimes they can show you a click map, what they call a click map. And you can look and see, and oftentimes you'll put these calls to action at several different places. Sometimes it's just hyperlinking a word or a phrase, right? Other times it's a button, but you're using all these different things. So you want at least 3, and if you'll go back and look at the click map of what people actually clicked on, oftentimes you'll see people clicked on all 3. So it's just a way of making sure that people are getting it. And I want to be honest with you, you have to tell people what you want them to do. Don't assume they're going to respond. You have to tell them, because oftentimes people, they just don't follow through. So this is what we want you to do. Manage and build your brand. Now, this is kind of your thinking in marketing, but as a church, this is real important also. So you want to make sure that you're communicating consistently. If you have a logo, that it's a logo that's current. It's a logo that is we talk about receptivity. It's receptive to those in your community. The logo we've kind of been experimenting with in the church where I am in Pine Mountain. It's an iconic bell tower. Church has been there since 1909. I think it's when the building was built. And first unit was this big bell tower. Gorgeous. Outdoor, huge stained glass windows, the whole thing, but the logo becomes the bell tower. And it's something that people just can recognize just driving down the road. They look up and see it. So you want to be able to reinforce that. Use consistent colors, et cetera, and just think of it in terms of these big corporations. Do you see, McDonald's using something other than the golden arches? Not really. You look at AT&T, you look at Verizon, you look at any of those. Why do they use the exact colors every time? Because you begin to identify their business based on those colors, the kind of font they use, everything. So you want to just think in those terms because it makes for better communication. All right, let's talk about some best practices and tools. Now, some of these you may be using, some of them not, but let me run through some of these fairly quickly. One of the newest tools that is a great asset to churches now, and don't be scared by this, most of you are already using AI, ChatGPT. Now, some of you may have played with it a little bit, and there's been a lot of discussion about, writing sermons on it and whatever, and it can actually do that. Okay, but let me show you what I've put on the screen here. This basically is the landing page. You type in a question. It's designed to be interactive, right? And so you can respond back and forth to it, ask it to do something different or more, whatever. Kind of like talking to a human. It's frankly quite scary at times, okay? It'll tell you jokes and all kinds of things. But this is what I did, and this is what I'm going to encourage you to do. The marketing world is going berserk with AI. Because many companies now are realizing they can write really good marketing copy just using something like ChatGPT. So here's what I entered. Look at this for a second. Oh, I can't read it on that little screen. Write a promotional paragraph for men's steak night, which we're having a week from Saturday. And then I wrote the rest, and it's choppy. It's not full sentences. It's the main information, right? Keynote speaker, David Burton, Jacksonville, Florida. He's spoken internationally. Our musicians are located at First Baptist, when, and the time. Now, that's all I put in. But look at the promotional paragraph it wrote. We're not going to sit and read the whole thing, but it's a pretty good paragraph. And you know what? It really made me mad. Because for me to have written a paragraph with this many words in it, I would have probably labored for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, looking at it, changing it, whatever. But this did it in a matter of seconds. I hit the last word, hit the enter, and it almost immediately started writing it. Now here's something else I did. I went in and put basically the resume, the biography of our speaker, and I said, write me a promotional paragraph about David Burton being our guest speaker at, and I put in the other key information. And it gave me 3 paragraphs. Wonderful press release. Now, be honest, there were a few phrases that didn't really quite sound like what I might have written, but in just a matter of minutes, I was able to go in, tweak some of those phrases, make some changes in those phrases, and make it sound like it was something that was more original, to us. But it was a great marketing paragraph. So you can tell it how to do that. Now, here's something else. It's also a great tool to try to, especially if you're not a real creative, some of you may be real creatives, but if you're not a real creative, maybe you're doing a Bible study series, or you're doing a particular sermon, or a special kind of something. You can just type in ChatGPT, give me 5 possible titles for. Now, when Jimmy and I were talking and getting ready for this, I sent him 5, 6, I don't remember how many it was, but that's what I did. And I said, this is the basic topics. What are some possible titles? Well, you can do that with a sermon. I actually said, give me a good sermon title for, and I put in the passage. Nothing more. And it gave me multiple titles that were right on target. Okay? Now, folks, some of you may think, well, that's cheating a little bit, don't you think? Hey, look, if you're not real good with titles make a big difference. Titles make a big difference. And so if people see that, they will be anticipating whatever it is because they see a title that's engaging. So there's just lots of different ways you can use it in church ministry. I'm not recommending you write your sermons on it for sure, but there are lots of other ways you can utilize this AI that will save you an incredible amount of time. Okay. One final thing when we're talking about the chat GPT, it's an artificial intelligence, and it's going to give you all kinds of options, everything from creating images, you could create YouTube thumbnails, there's a lot of different things that it'll do that'll be a valuable resource to you in your ministry. Now let's look at a couple of other things that will be helpful to you and some best practices. We were talking about creating titles. Headlines Co-Schedule is another tool where you can create good headlines, engaging headlines. This could be used for writing a blog post. It could be used for all kinds of other things, even the subject lines on your emails. People don't open an email that they're not interested in. Now that sounds really simple, but every one of you, I know, have a ton of emails that you don't open. And the main reason is because when it pops up, that subject line doesn't get your attention. Or you go, not that big a deal right now. Maybe I'll come back to it. How many of you come back to it? Yeah, I know. I'm the same way. So this just helps you to do that as well. And it gives you scoring. As you see in this case, the title that I put in there was How to Effectively Follow Up After Vacation Bible School, Ideas That Work. Okay, so this is a great title. It scores an 83 based on the various components. If you scroll down the page, it shows you the kind of things it scored on. A power word, an emotional word, those kind of things. And sometimes I'll end up entering, 8, 10, 12 things, keep tweaking it until I can get it out. You want it in the green, the scoring, and so the scoring starts in green at about 70, but it's another great tool. Some of you may already be using Canva, but Canva is basically a professional graphic design. And everything I'm showing you today is free. Most all of them have a paid version that will give you more tools, but I'm showing you what works for free. And most all of these tools, I don't use a paid version myself. It's adequate enough to do everything I need to do with the free version. So Canva will let you import pictures from your congregation, people pictures, whatever, do overlays, do all kinds of other things, and there are thousands and thousands of templates that you can pull up, use that template, drop it in, and add your personal information to it. Replace the picture, whatever. But it really steps up the game as far as designing. What you do not want in the world we live in today, where people are on media all the time and they're engaged by what they see, you don't want to be putting up things that look like you just created it in an old Microsoft publisher or something of that sort, okay? And this will let you do things that look really, really sharp when you do that. So just a good tool. Another good tool, this is another page. This is just when you open it up. When you open up and create something, this is the logo I was telling you about. We've been working with at First Baptist Church Pine Mountain. This was a single color. It actually is created as a YouTube thumbnail, but it fits the wide screen that you use in PowerPoint in your congregation, unless you've got wraparound screens. So this is a 10:9 ratio is what they use, and it lets you create that just like that, and then drop it, just save it as a JPEG or a PNG, and then you can use it right there in your PowerPoint on a Sunday. There are all kinds of things you can do, and down the left side you're able to store, you import all these pictures that you can use to create whatever. And to do that, you also need to have, in today's world, a good resource for photos. You can get professional photos at pixabay.com. These are royalty-free photos. And this lets you be able to use a photo that is really high-level professional photography. Now, I will say this. Your best pictures, especially when you're talking about something with your church, are going to be of your people. But just don't take a fuzzy snapshot and use it. You need somebody who's got a decent camera and can take some good pictures and do that. But Pixabay is a great place to be able to get all kinds of other images for prayer, Sunday school, Bible study. There's all kinds of things that you might use in your church. The other one that I use frequently is unsplash.com. Unsplash.com. Both of these have hundreds of thousands of images, and you just sort based on a word or a phrase. And it'll give you all kinds of options. There are paid options, but there are all kinds of free options as well. Another one that is really great for churches is called Designer. And Designer is primarily an ebook creator. This is a free version also. They have paid version, but the Designer will let you take your own photographs and take a blog post. You can import directly from a Word document, directly from the internet. If you have it in a blog post, several ways you can import the information. And what happens is you may create from a blog post that's, say, 500 words, you may create a 4-page little ebook. Okay? And it's a great piece. I've been trying to find time. I do a thing that I give to all guests, when they come and visit, 10 promises from your pastor. Okay? These are the 10 things I'm going to do, and you can be sure of. People have a lot of questions in the world today, right? So I give them those 10 promises, and I keep thinking, I want to import those and make a small ebook so it looks really sharp, and it's not just mostly text in that. And you can do that, like if I'm able to do it while I'm at Pine Mountain as transitional pastor, I'll use photographs we've taken from activities at the church to use in the document itself. Great tool, really professional looking when you use it. Another tool or tools would be something like a Dropbox or a OneDrive. We're a small church. We're right now, the last month, we've been averaging about 50. And we use several volunteers, obviously, leading singing, helping run the media, worship leaders, that kind of thing. So we just set up a Dropbox. It's a media folder, and we can put all of the different things we need for a worship service, including the sermon PowerPoint I drop in there, music, the slides, the whole thing. And then our media guy can pull all that together out of that and drop it into ProPresenter for the worship service. So some kind of tool like this, OneDrive or Dropbox, you may have something else, but it's very valuable for your team to be able to all share the same folders. Now, let's talk about 4 steps to increase your Google search ranking. 4 steps to increase your Google search ranking. They estimate that over 90% of all internet searches are by Google. 90% or more. Now, when you think about that, that means that most likely a large number of people in your community, when they search church near me, They search children's activities near me. Whatever it is they search, most likely it's going to be on Google. So you need to have a good presence on Google. Used to, we'd say that, people would walk through the front door of your church, and that's where we want to make sure we greet them. But the majority of people now will have already visited your website, but they may not have found it via the website. They found it via your Google profile. Okay? So here's some steps to help you get that Google profile up off the bottom of the ranking, right? You want it on the first page. How many of you scroll to page 3 to find information? Most of us don't. Okay? Now, this isn't a guarantee, but these are things that we found that will help raise your ranking up and help people, depending on how they're searching, to understand. So the first thing is claim and complete your Google profile. Google shifted all of their business profiles over to Maps search. So now, because so many people, when they were looking for something, wanted to know the location, so now it's all integrated together. So you want to go on there and claim your page. Someone from the church has to do that. It'll be verified, and then you'll have basically management, administrative privileges on there. So you can upload, you can do all kinds of things to your Google profile. You want to go through the entire process, enter all the information that they're asking for, the best you can. The more information, the better it is on your ranking. Okay? Secondly, you want to think about reviews. This is the second thing that helps boost a ranking, and that is you want current positive reviews. So I have at the bottom of many of the newsletters I send out to First Baptist, at the bottom it has a link and it says, give a Google review or upload some of your pictures. It's in almost every one, because I want to encourage our people to be thinking, oh man, we had a good time. Now, a lot of times your reviews come from people who aren't, directly affiliated with your church. Somebody passing through, somebody visiting while on vacation or something, and they'll do that. But the more reviews you can get, even if you can basically assign, this sounds funny, but basically find a group of people that are going to be positive of your church and say, would you the first week of March put up a review? Would you the second week of March, third week of March? Just get it scattered out where there's a good flow of reviews and try to encourage that. The more reviews you have, the more likely you'll have additional reviews. And this boosts your rating, because what it says to the Google algorithm is this is a place that's worth noticing because people are commenting about it. Okay? So it's a little different than me just inviting a person, but it's pretty close because it's personal testimony, right? Okay. Number 3, photos. You want to upload photos frequently. No less than once a week is what I recommend, but upload photos. Now here's what I put in parentheses. When you have the photo, before you upload it with IMG 2742 or whatever your system names it, change the name. Put the name of your church, in our case, First Baptist Church, Pine Mountain, and then if it's the men's steak night, I'm going to put men's steak night. Now that sounds like a really long title. You're not worried about that coming up in a search as far as people looking for that specifically. But now, if people are searching for a church near me or a church with men's activities or whatever, you've put those key words in the title of the photo, so when somebody Googles it, your photo may pop up, which connects them back to your Google page. Okay? So you want to upload those pictures. If you have a big activity, a big event, you may upload 4, 5, 6 pictures. In fact, most things that you might upload to your Facebook page or your Instagram page are things you want to put on your Google page. Okay? Because people will find Google before they find the others. The fourth thing to help you with updates is frequent updates, and there is a section on the Google profile that says updates. Photos give you a very short text box to write something about the event. Okay? Men's, steak night, 55 men attended. whatever, That's just a very short statement underneath the photo. An update will let you put, I think it's 5,000, I can't remember, but up to 5,000 characters, something like that. Okay, you don't necessarily need that much, but you can put more in that about whatever that activity is that you're wanting to promote. You can also add a photo to that update. Okay, now again, you're wanting to think keywords. We're not having time to really talk about keywords, but you want to think keywords, and any word that might be something people would look for, think of 3 or 4 other ways to say the same word and use all of them in your description. Okay? Because everybody doesn't think like you, right? Okay? So we might use the word a discipleship program. How else could we say that? Now, an unchurched person who is being convicted in some way, they're probably not going to type in the word discipleship program. You could add the word training. You could add the word Bible education. You could add the word biblical understanding of whatever. Just see how you just think of other ways to say exactly what discipleship, which we understand in the church world, but many others may not. So you're adding those as possible words or phrases that may be caught by Google as well. So those frequent updates, if possible, at least one a week, could be more. You can post a variety of things there, but that's a great place to post it. Again, telling Google that algorithm understands there's something going on here. There are things happening here on a regular basis. Therefore, they're going to move it up because they want to recommend to people who are searching for whatever the best options. Okay? Now, let's talk about 3 keys to effective social media strategy. Most churches really don't have a social media strategy. Most churches, a lot of times will just, they post promotional things. This is coming up, that kind of thing. But that's not what we want to do. We need to really have a strategy. And I'm going to give you some things to think about. The first is you want to think repetition and saturation. Now, whatever the platform is, you want to be able to post a similar post on all platforms. So let me just assume for a minute that you have a Facebook page and an Instagram. So if you're posting a photo of some particular activity you're having, then you want to make sure that's posted on both those platforms, and then you're going to add Google as well. Why? Because that is going to saturate the same audience. And that is a key to trying to get connection and build credibility. The more people see, the more credible you appear, right? So saturate and then continue to repeat. So if you're uploading a certain thing, you want to make sure it goes on all platforms so that you're saturating your folks that are out there. You're using keywords in the descriptions so you can find folks that are not already checked as a member of your particular group or your church or your page. And when you start seeing in your analytics that you're seeing more clicks or impressions by people who are not members of your page, you're making good progress. That's a good sign. Post with variety. I recommend a 1-to-4 ratio for posting. That's promotion to other types of posting. A lot of church posts just basically nothing but events, activities. This is what we're doing Sunday. This is what we just did. Okay? Here we had something for the kids, whatever. Okay? But you need variety, because if people think that your posts on Instagram or Facebook are only about coming events, they're not as interested in that. Now, they may notice it. But if they start looking for your post, because in your post you're posting good devotional thoughts, usually short, but devotional thoughts, inspirational quotes, a C.S. Lewis quote, whatever, A. Tozer, what is it, A.W. Tozer? Yeah, I thought, went totally blank for a second. A.W. Tozer on prayer. Whatever it may be, you can do that. You can also find lots of things. I have hundreds and hundreds of things I've gathered over the years that I post on my Facebook and Instagram pages. You can post scripture, just a simple scripture quote. A weekly quote from the pastor's messages. Let me park here for just a second. In the community where I'm serving there in Pine Mountain, when we did the demographics and psychographic study, we saw one of the top things that were sought by people who are not in the church community, unchurched. The number 2 highest ranked thing was quality messages. Okay, if they're not walking in the church and they're not watching a video on YouTube, if every week there's at least one good quote that somebody finds from the message of the pastor and posts that online, what's happening in time as that person starts seeing that? You know, our pastor, Sunday our pastor preached on, and there's the quote, okay? Really important to building confidence in the community that's looking and seeing those things. Same thing on Google, upload those same kind of quotes. And then use cartoons. People love cartoons. Now, don't get into a bunch of political cartoons, but there's a lot of funny stuff. Joe McKeever still publishes cartoons, on Baptist Press. A lot of times I'll pull one of those and republish it. There are lots of good, funny cartoons that you can publish. So that's a good idea to post with variety. Number 3, post with the unchurched in mind. I've already talked about this earlier. When you post, think, how will an unchurched person understand this? Will they read it and understand it? Is it clear? Am I using words or terminology that would be foreign to them, basically? Okay, now let's talk about the 5 website must-haves. First, you want a simple structure on your website. You want easy navigation options. You don't want 32 things across the top bar. And then each of those drops down into 17 more options. Okay? The fewer the options, the more likely people are going to click on it. At the top of your page, you're almost better to have, 4 or 5 options and nothing more. Okay? Now, oftentimes we want to put the contact information right at the top because we think that's important and we think people are going to click on that. That information can be in the footer. Somebody who really wants to contact you, they'll scroll because they want to, okay? Use your space for other things. Again, a 3-click maximum to get where you're going or for them to get where they're going. And remember, it has to be a responsive site. So depending on how you have the orientation, you want it to look good in either orientation. Big deal. So every page you build on your website, make sure it looks good in mobile. Secondly, clearly state what you do above the fold. Now, you understand what the fold is? That's where you pull it up on your computer, and that's the main thing you see. It's the top of the website. Newspaper term, selling newspapers above the fold. The big headline was right there at the top. So we want to clearly state what you do above the fold. Now, let me see. Yeah, okay. Think about it this way. Your home page has got to pass the 5-second grunt test. Okay? Now, I'm going to give you 5 seconds to look at this home page I'm about to put up. You're going to get 5 seconds, then I'm moving it. And I want you to tell me what you saw, what they do, how you respond, what are they wanting you to do, what's their call to action, that kind of thing. Okay, you ready? 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. Okay? What was the organization?
New Work Foundation.
New Work Foundation. Okay? Top left corner. Prime location. Top left corner. Secondly, what do?
Church.
They help churches. What was the key word they used? Resourcing. Yeah, resourcing new churches. Okay, so they're church planting. Obviously, a foundation is providing funding. Okay, number 3, what would they like for you to do? Did you see a call to action?
I don't think so.
Did you see one?
That was a button, I don't know what's there.
It may be a little small, but yeah, donate now. Right? And that's their call to action. Okay? On a church website, it will look a little different, obviously. But on the church website, you want to have a call to action. What do you want people to do when they come visit your site? Now, you're not going to put, donate now, you know. It's not really what you want. But you do want them to take an action. You want them to stay on your page, right? You want them to do it. So you'll want to think, what kind of call to action? Oftentimes you'll have a call to action in multiple places that are above the fold. Maybe as many as 2, right below the main paragraph, something else, okay? And then you want to make sure that your church, it's clear what we do, okay? Oftentimes you may have some kind of a tagline, something of the sort. On our homepage at Pine Mountain, the ministry assistant there did this. I didn't even suggest it. But it says very simply, connecting people to Jesus and each other. Is that pretty clear?
Yeah.
Doesn't go into a lot of detail, doesn't explain, you know, what connection looks like, it doesn't do all that stuff. And oftentimes we think we need to explain everything. Okay? But it simply says, quick glance, 5-second grunt test, connecting people to Jesus and each other. Okay? We're obviously a church, First Baptist Church, and we want them to respond in some way. So think about that when you're structuring your website. The website must have, number 3, is clearly state what you do above the fold. So just like I mentioned, you don't want to use inside language. You want your homepage to be, and you need to understand this, you own your website. This is your real estate. That's why I put on the slide the land you own. If you have a YouTube page, can YouTube take that down? You don't own it. If you have a Facebook page, can Facebook take that down? What about Instagram?
Yes.
The website is under your control. This is the territory, this is the real estate that you own. So you want to make sure that it's clear exactly what you do above the fold when you look at that. Number 4, connect to the visitor. Connect to the guest who may be looking at this. Think in terms of the guest on your website, what you can do to solve their problem or their pain point. Connect, but don't convince. Connect, but don't convince. So, what are the kinds of needs that are in your community? What are the main issues that are being dealt with in your community? Every community can be a little different, right? Every community can be a little different. So, what can you do to solve the problem? You can state that this is what we want to do. You know what the number 1 thing is in the area where I'm serving? I told you the number 2 was what? Quality messages, you know, good messages. Number 1 was to build relationships with people, or significant relationships, I think is how it was phrased, with other people. Man, is that not what the church ought to be about? Right? Okay? So we have to think in terms of how do we communicate to people who aren't church people that, man, this is a great place to build relationships. This is a great place to do life together. This is a great place to have friends, right? So knowing your community makes a big difference. Now, you can use things like text to join list, registration, online giving. All of these are things that you can do on your website and connect to so people can come to. Now, if you're linking to your website and you're promoting a Facebook, on Instagram, on Google, don't link to the home page. You always want to link in those posts to start with. But don't link to the home page. If you're asking people to register to event, link them to that subpage on the site. Then let them search around. But you want to send them right where they want. Remember, 3 or less clicks is what you want. Number 5, use design and images that tell your story. People, not property. I can't tell you the hundreds, literally, of websites that I've looked at over the years that you load that page and at the top of the page is a great picture of the church building. How excited would you be to go and attend because you saw a church building? What we know is when unchurched people have been surveyed, Building doesn't really make a lot of difference. Now, if it's all run down, that communicates something, right? Okay, so you need to have, good landscaping and everything look nice and that kind of thing. But they're not going to come because they see a picture on your website. But if you have a picture, let's say, well, no, I'll give you my secret. I cheat. I always make sure I've got a photographer ready and handy and present when we have some kind of high attendance day. Easter Sunday, back to church Sunday, anytime we're going to have lots of people. When I was a pastor in Oklahoma, before we moved to Michigan, I would put people up in the balcony. And we did one of those welcome times, welcoming people. And so I put somebody up in the balcony. As soon as we did the welcome time, they were going click, 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 click. And you know what was on our website and in our brochures, everything else? People being friendly. People laughing, people enjoying themselves, people hugging each other. See, there's all kinds of things. People communicate emotion, and you want people who see it to not think in terms of a building. Well, I wonder where I'm going to go. They think in terms of, wow, they look really friendly. They look nice. Boy, they are having some fun, right? Okay, so think in terms of people, not property. Okay, let me give you 6 email marketing necessities. Then we're wrapping it up for, we'll have a Q&A time. But these are some things that will help you. Number 1, engaging subject lines. We talked about that a little earlier. And if you'll take the time to make sure you've got a subject line. Now, in email, when you pull up an email, you have the primary subject line and you have what they call a preview line. Both of those lines can communicate clearly. Sometimes I'll get a really good subject, but it's too long. So don't worry about the count of words. You want to worry about the count of characters, okay? How many characters? So when they pull it up on their phone, remember, mobile's most important. 65 to 75% are probably going to check email on phone, okay? So look at that, anywhere from 45 to 60 characters probably. Then put the first part of that subject line there, and I put the second part of the preview line. Why? Because when they glance at it, they're going to read the whole thing together. It doesn't drop off the page, okay? Second, is it scannable? Any kind of email needs to be scannable. Man, we're good writers. We like words. But unless that person is a really serious core people, how do people look at articles and things on their phones? Right? Okay, so it needs to be scannable. In other words, use bold print for key things, key words, key phrases, underline, italics, but use headers too. You could have a 4-paragraph short article, and each of those paragraphs have a header with 2, 3, 4 words that describe what's there. Why? Because you want them, if they're scrolling through that, you want them to be hooked by something they see. And if it's just a clump of words and text, they're not going to get it. They're going to keep moving, okay? Number 3, graphics and video click-throughs. In your email, think links, links, links. How many links for your call to action did I tell you earlier you need in your email?
3.
At least 3. So if it's a video that you're wanting them to look at, wanting some kind of training, do the same thing. Use graphics that are engaging. You can create those in Canva, right? You can find pictures on both that Unsplash and Pixabay, right? You can find engaging photographs. So think in terms of that. We're in a very visual world now. Then articles. You can have articles that are there that are engaging. Again, use headings, etc. And then use your analytics. Every tool you have will have analytics, both on your website, Facebook, Instagram, analytics. And look and follow the analytics. And you will start seeing what people are responding to or not responding to. Okay? All right. That wraps up what we want to talk about today with this. So let's open it up for some questions. Anybody have some additional questions? I know that's fast. Yes, sir.
I haven't been over there in a while to just poke around and look. I mean, spend time with it. But how do you find your Google profile?
The easiest way is just go to Google, type in the name of your church and the city where you are, and it'll probably pop up.
Okay.
Now, if you haven't claimed it already, you will have to go ahead and click on it and claim it. And then you can add several administrators. We have 2 or 3 on ours right now there, but that's a huge piece for you. Okay, any other questions? Yes, sir.
Do you think it's important to have someone in your church to handle all of this, or maybe a team of people just to handle social media and things of that nature?
Yeah, the hard part is in smaller churches, it's hard to find people that are willing to do that. It doesn't take a lot of time, and particularly Facebook right now, Facebook will allow you to schedule things in advance. And so you could take 8 or 10 images and do that. It's great if you have a volunteer who's willing to do that and help with that. As a pastor, you may, give some direction. I'd give them a list like I showed you today of here's some things, let's post. Try to give some guidance about, the promotional things. If we've got a big promotional thing coming up, let's make sure we find, 4 or 5 other things, quotes or whatever that we can put up in between each of those types of things. The question I didn't answer, let me take it from where you are. How many times should you post in a week to your social media? Okay. Let me see a raise of your hands. How many of you have a Facebook page? Okay, looks like we're almost 100%. Okay. So how many times a day do you go on your Facebook page?
Several. Personal or church?
Well, either, but personal mostly, at that point. Okay, the reason I tell you that is because when I do consultations with churches on social media, they go, well, we try to post something at least once a week. Okay, if you're trying to communicate a message and you're saying from the pulpit, I want you to respond, okay, that's the only time you have that congregation there, right? So you really can't announce that more than once a week to that congregation. Okay, but you've got a group of people who are connected to your Instagram page, your Facebook page, etc., and they're probably like you, and the reality is some of them may be much more obsessive than you. So most every time they get on their page, you'd like for them to be scrolling and come across something from the church. Now, if you know how Facebook works, it doesn't stay at the top of the page very long. It keeps moving. So I typically I have a public profile page, but I typically on my page will post anywhere from 3 to 7 things per day. 3 to 7 things per day. And it just depends on what the post is, but sometimes there'll be a scripture verse, sometimes there'll be something else, and sometimes they get a lot of engagement. And other times it's like almost none. Okay? You can also, for other tools, you can use something like Hootsuite, some of those kind of tools that let you schedule in advance. And you can do that for multiple platforms all at one time. Facebook now will let you schedule to both Facebook and Instagram at the same time if you have both. Okay? So the thought is volunteers, you're better. I'll tell you what I did at the last church where I was transitional pastor. We were much smaller. I had about 16, 17 people when I got there, running, 40 or so by the time I finished and they got a pastor. But I got 3 volunteers from the congregation, and Catherine was assigned to finding, humor. Some kind of humor, funny quotes, cartoons, whatever. Another one was assigned to find biblical things, scriptures, things of that sort to post. Another one was church events and promotional. And so they all had different things that they were responsible for. And so I asked them to try to post something several times a week, each one of them, so it wasn't all on one person, but they all had the administrative ability to be able to post those. So if you've got the volunteers who are willing to do it, there are some places like Our Daily Bread, Today in the Word, David Jeremiah. Some of those are places that I go to that they've got teams that do great graphics with scriptures. really good. And oftentimes I'll take their graphic with the scripture. If you go look at my page, Facebook, and then / Bobby Gilstrap, it's just real easy. But you go and look at my page and you'll see a lot of these are like Today in the Word, Our Daily Bread, but it's a scripture verse with a great photograph. And then I usually just repeat the scripture verse in the text of the post. Sometimes I'll, write something else. But a lot of times it's quick. And people think I spend a ton of time on social media, but typically I don't spend more than about 25 or 30 minutes. Because I set it all up, and I program it, and I hit go. And like I've had things posting today while I was here. I hadn't touched my phone, but it was all pre-programmed. So that helps, and you can do that with your church page, which is great. Yes, ma'am.
Question. So going off of what you said with growing the volunteer base, when you identify those people in your church, do you give them like a social media guideline? So from like a theology standpoint, if they're pulling the things that you're saying?
Yeah, having some guidelines is a good thing. Yeah, having some guidelines. What you want to say to them, you're going to have a hard time trying to do a theological deal, but you need to make sure they understand that whatever the church's statement of faith is, we need to be in harmony with that. We're not going to be posting a lot of controversial stuff. We're not trying to stir up just for clicks kind of thing, with something real controversial. But we want to make sure it lines up with what our statement of faith is. So, good question. Yes, ma'am.
What do you think about, we have a slideshow on our homepage. We try to include youth and, have children in there, adults, events. And how many slides do you think are good to have in a, that
Okay.
just highlights?
Yeah. Let me ask your group, all of you, when you go to a website, how long do you stay at the top of that homepage?
Depends on what's there.
This moves pretty fast.
Yeah, usually a second. It's got to be slow enough that you can actually read the content, and it may not be much. But the reality is most people, they land on the page because they're usually looking for something specific. Okay, they're searching. Used to, the day was where people would get on the internet and they would just, search all over the place, whatever. But now, the mode of operating for most people, it's intentional. I rarely get on any kind of a website that I wasn't looking intentionally for what the content is on that site. So, there's debate about whether banners like that are really helpful or useful. It's another piece that requires keeping updated, obviously, because you want something like that current. But I found oftentimes that it's better just like if you have a key event coming up, like you might have that as the banner. But always remember, you want it to be, pass the grunt test. Whatever's at the top of that page, you want people to see quickly and understand this is the church, this is what we're about, here's how I want you to respond. So if they stay long enough to see the banner, you're basically throwing out multiple calls to action. And what we know is if you're presented with too many calls to action, too many different things, people tend not to respond. It seems to be like overload. And like if you had 7 different choices of pizza today, that line would have moved a lot slower. I'm not saying you would have skipped the pizza, but the more choices that are there initially, they're going to be looking for something intentionally. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
What web hosting or site building tools do you recommend? Like we're currently with WordPress, but it's way too technical for our people that are keeping up. So what are some other options that you would recommend?
Well, all of my sites are WordPress too, and they can be complex, but what I found is there are some tools that make it really intuitive. And so I'm trying to remember what the last one, I helped an AVL company with their marketing for about a year, and I was trying to remember, I don't remember now, it was Beaver something, I can't remember what it was, but it integrates right with your WordPress, and so everything you go in and put in, it was really simple. You just basically hit publish and it puts it right on the page where you want it to. So that works. There are others that are real intuitive, things like Wix, some of those, there are some limitations usually to some of those, but they are very intuitive. They are also fairly simple. And I'm going blank on the term now, but there's a term that you can go in and basically type in just like you would a Word document, and it converts everything to HTML for you. So whoever's working on it doesn't have to have coding in their background. You can still learn a little coding, so if something kind of goes awry, you can flip over to the HTML code and you know what to look for, but you don't have to be proficient in it. So there are some simpler things that you can operate with other than the WordPress. But WordPress is really popular, but I would suggest finding one of those tools.